Welcome everyone to this third in a series of webinars for new DESs and DCMs. And as you see today, we are focusing on legal issues. We have a couple of guests whose expertise is in this area, and they'll be with us again at Lake Junaluska. You'll meet them in a minute. As I said, this is the third in a series of webinars. I think most of you have participated in the first two, but in case this is your first one, I just want to remind you that we have recorded the earlier sessions on supervision and personnel, and they have been sent to all of the new participants by way, the links to those webinars have been sent to you by way of email. If you have any trouble accessing them, please contact me and or Catherine Carter here at the GBAGM offices, and we'll be glad to help you locate those. The purpose of these webinars is just to give you a soft introduction to each of these issues, to get the wheels turning in preparation for our time together next month. We'll continue to delve into each of these in 3 different learning sessions while we're together at Lake Junaluska. So don't feel like you have to master all this in these first sessions. This is just to get the juices flowing and get you thinking about these issues. We're going to start with this little exercise about where in the world you are today, and this is a way of practicing with the interactive tool that Jason just explained to you, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jason to walk us through this exercise.
Thanks, Myron. In the upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll find the pointer tool. Looks like the arrow icon. Just click on that, bring it down onto the map, and click on the part of the world that you're joining us from today.
Here we go. Looks like David Watson's right in the middle of the country. And as we've noted in some of our earlier webinars, our participation reflects our population across the country. As United Methodists, most densely are in the southeast and along the east. But it's good to see you all there, and if others join us later, welcome to them as well. We'll see how that populates it. Thank you very much. All right, well, we're going to move right along here. And again, my name is Myron Wingfield. I'm the Associate General Secretary for the Division of Ordained Ministry here at Higher Education and Ministry, located in Nashville. And our guests today are Becky Williams of the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women, and Steve Lambert, from the General Counsel on Finance and Administration, and I'm going to invite them both to introduce themselves. Becky, please say a word to our guests today.
Thank you, Myron. It's great to be here, and hello to all of you across the U.S. As Myron said, I'm with the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women. I'm the Senior Director for Advocacy and Sexual Ethics. This position involves developing resources for training in prevention and response to sexual misconduct in all ministry settings. It's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to meeting each of you at Lake Junaluska later in August.
Very good. Thank you, Becky, and welcome. And Steve, please give us a word of introduction from your desk there at GCFA.
My name is Steve Lambert, and I'm privileged to serve as the General Counsel of GCFA. I came to this position about a year ago after having been in private practice in Washington, D.C. and other areas of the country and the world in a large law firm of about 1,000 lawyers. I'd served in various law firms over a period of about 40 years and have very much enjoyed this new role with the church. Every day is different. Our role here at GCFA in the legal department is to protect the assets of the church and to help others in ministry. So happy to be here today and happy to serve as a co-presenter with Becky, who I always learn from every time I get to present with her.
Great. Thanks a lot, Steve. And I'm sure I speak for all of us in saying thanks to both of you for your willingness to share this time with us and to get us started in this endeavor. And we're going to pause here and pray before we get started. Let us pray. Oh God, we thank you for this day and this opportunity to learn and grow together. And we ask that you bless us as we learn, as we grow, and as we serve in our various offices. Guide us that in all that we say and do, we may seek your will and follow your way. We offer these and all of our prayers in the name of Christ, and together we say Amen. And with that, Steve, since you're the lead on the next one, I'm going to hand it over to you and ask you to take it away from here.
Thanks, Myron. It's my hope today to accomplish the following. First, I'd like to outline several important legal issues that we hear about every week here at GCFA that I'll be covering in more depth when we are together at Lake Junaluska. Second, I hope to provide you various materials that you will have a chance to review, hopefully, prior to our sessions in late August. And if you have the time, I'm going to outline some homework assignments that I think will help make the time in August more productive. But first, before I do any of those things, I'd like to put some of my comments in important perspective. Throughout all of our presentations and our time together, I'd ask that you remember that we appreciate the importance of that oft-quoted adage by Stephen Covey: the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And for me, the main thing is not for you to become as conversant on legal issues, especially secular law issues, as if you were an attorney. There's enough of us already. Rather, it is for me to help you in these presentations do what we're all called to do, to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, and to do that without unnecessary diversions and disruptions that can be caused by legal issues. Like all of us at GCFA, I see my role as enabling you to fulfill your mission within the church. One other comment before I get rolling: none of these issues are mysterious. All of them, with proper understanding, are really quite manageable. There's no importance signaled by the issues that I'm handling today versus the ones I'm holding off until August to treat. So with that, let's get moving. There are two tax-related issues I'd like to cover today. The first is issues relating to accountable reimbursement plans. The second are issues relating to federal tax exemption. Specifically today, we'll be treating issues relating to the group ruling. We get a lot of questions about accountable reimbursement plans at churches. These are arrangements set up by an employer like a church to reimburse or advance business expenses incurred by employees, lay and clergy. What's important to remember is that to be a recognized plan, number one, all expenses must have a business connection. And second, there needs to be an accounting, an adequate accounting for the expenses within a reasonable period of time. 60 days has been determined to be a safe harbor. And third, any excess reimbursements or advances must be returned within a reasonable period of time, say 120 days. So why has this become an issue? It's because many churches throughout the country seemingly have an accountable reimbursement fund or a budget as part of the compensation package for employees, and they simply don't follow the rules. Some pay out the unused portion of the fund in December. Others simply short-circuit the system by paying out 1/12 of the fund each month with the individual's paycheck, but still classifying the payment as non-taxable. And other churches allow the spending down of the account in a mad rush at the year end with no documentation. So what would I like you to remember? The takeaway here is straightforward. Your churches need to follow the rules, or else they can embarrass themselves, their pastor, their laity with the results of an IRS audit, which are becoming more prevalent every year. I've listed 2 places here for you to go for resource information for yourself or your churches. And I've suggested a bit of homework. Before our time together in August, if you could, do a survey of some of your churches, say at least 5 of them, and be ready to tell us when we're together in August how many churches actually in your survey truly have qualified accountable reimbursement plans. Please share with any who do not the materials provided to you, and we'll return to this topic in August. The second tax issue I'd like to cover isn't quite the negative, as it relates to the tax exemption and an easy way for your churches and church-related entities to obtain such recognition. You know, churches are tax exempt by operation of statute. But many times, and for a variety of reasons, churches need formal recognition of exempt status. So there are 2 options. You can file a lengthy form with the Internal Revenue Service and pay a fee and obtain it on your own as a church. Or you can come within an existing group ruling controlled by GCFA, which is IRS recognition of a group of entities that are affiliated with certain central organizations that have been granted group ruling status. We help nearly 2,000 churches annually in this regard. It's important to them for a number of reasons. It certainly is cheaper and easier for churches, and while a bit more time-consuming, still easier for church-related entities than going directly to the Internal Revenue Service. And with the letter certifying group ruling status, your churches can benefit from discount programs, can avoid paying sales tax, and get other benefits as well. So what's the takeaway? It's easier than ever now for your churches and church-related entities to get a letter from us at GCFA certifying they're a part of our group ruling. We've automated the process. It takes within 3 to 4 minutes to do the whole thing. We'll show you via demonstration how easy it is in August. Before then, if you would, please take time to at least scan the IRS publication on the topic and go to the link that I've provided to see how quick and efficient the group ruling site really is. Extra credit? Send the link to every church in your district so they stop using the old forms and use the quicker new way of dealing with this issue. Now, there may be some questions at this time, and I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll just remind folks you can send in your questions using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Just look for the question mark icon, and when you click on that question mark icon, that's how you send us your questions. Steve, I don't see any questions related to tax issues at this point, so I'll turn it back over to you.
The next area that I'd like to cover briefly today is property issues. As you may already have learned, the district superintendent's a focal point on many of these. They come in many contexts, some listed on this chart and others that aren't. We won't dive deeply into any of these today, but I want to remind you briefly about the one common core belief that helps, I think, explain how we are all to deal with any of the property issues that are listed. And that common core belief is the property trust clause. It's been part of our book of discipline since 1797. It's always been part of our DNA as a connection. Paragraph 2501 really says it all. All property, whether held at the jurisdictional, annual, or district conference levels, or by a local church or charge, or by an agency or institution of the church, shall be held in trust for the United Methodist Church and subject to the provisions of its discipline. Why? Well, because of our connectional system, we find this to be an essential element of our historic polity, a fundamental expression of United Methodism. And there's a more practical reason as well. There is no legal entity called the United Methodist Church. Thus, the United Methodist Church doesn't have legal attributes and cannot hold title to property. It can seem that property issues come from all directions, but I'd suggest it's all very manageable, especially if we all stay in our lane. District superintendents have special lanes to stay in property matters. And there are resources within your conference structure, chancellors, for example, and external resources, us at GCFA, outside counsel, that can and should be called upon at times. And should there be litigation on any property trust clause issue, there is potential financial help from GCFA. What I'd like you to do before we get together in August is to review the listed paragraphs on this slide. I think they'll help you in understanding the more detailed presentation in August and in dealing with the fact pattern I'm going to show you now. The second part of our homework would be to work through this fact pattern. An attorney sends to you a crisply worded letter saying that her client congregation has decided to no longer be United Methodist. It's changed all the governing documents relating to the church, conforming to state law. She says to you that they own everything now, and she's going to file a lawsuit against the United Methodist Church if you do anything contrary to her client. What I'd like you to do is to come in August prepared to discuss the answers to these questions. Is the church discontinued or abandoned per the Book of Discipline? What local church property is subject to the trust clause? Does it matter if the trust clause is written into the deed or not? Are the changes to the governing documents effective? And perhaps the most important question is the last one. What should you, as the district superintendent, do first after receiving this letter? The final topic I'd like to go over with you today briefly relates to how we protect certain assets of the church. GCFA has been charged with trademarking and then protecting the cross and flame and the words United Methodist. Paragraph 807.10 says that any church can use the cross and flame to identify United Methodist work, programs, or materials. To be strong in our positions against improper third-party use of the cross and flame, we have to be diligent internally to ensure that our use of the cross and flame as United Methodist is proper itself. We are a creative denomination. Some attempts at the use of the cross and flame cross the line. You can't keep the shape and design of the cross and flame you can't change the shape and design of the cross and flame without hurting the trademark. You can change colors, but they can't be solid. They must be solid, You can change colors, but they must be solid. These three examples, for various reasons, don't work. These don't either. The cross and flame must stand alone. It can't be superimposed on other images. Can't touch anything. These are pretty, but they just don't work. These do. And most times you'll see the cross and flame being used just fine. So what to remember? I'd hope you'd take away today that protecting what people remember us by is really important. Or else, quite frankly, we'll see that emblem where we don't want to see it, or used by organizations that are inappropriate, and then find ourselves powerless to do anything about it. So, your homework before August, consider the issue as you go around your district. And if you see any entity using a cross and flame in a way that you think might be an issue, take a picture of it and bring it with you in August. And as a group, we'll look at it and see what the group thinks. My final slide is one to remind you that the topics that we treat in August are your choice. I'm happy to cover whatever legal topics you'd like to have covered. Let me know what's troublesome to you already or what you'd like to hear more about. It could be immigration or other employment issues or more detail on property issues, on sales and leases, mortgages, what to do with cemeteries. Some people have problems with unrelated business income. Last year in this presentation, we had a number of questions about how to deal with registered sexual offenders who wish to worship in a church. You may have a whole host of other questions. Whatever you have, I would hope you feel comfortable in reaching out to me at slambert@gcfa.org and let me know so that we can fashion a presentation in August that meets your needs. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll turn that to see if you have any other questions.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. I think it was excellent. Very much appreciate that. And here's your contact information for all of you participants if you want to get that down. Remember, it'll be recorded in the webinar, so you can access it again later, but there it is. And feel free to reach out to Steve at his invitation. Also, it stirred in me a little United Methodist trivia question for you, Steve. I'm curious if you know what the first item listed in the 2012 Book of Disciplines Index is. Would you know that, by any chance?
I do not. Well, I bet you do, though.
Well, only because I looked it up when you were talking about the topic. But it is abandonment of local church property. The very first item in the index. So that'll be easy for folks to find, paragraph 2549, to read up on that. All right. Well, Jason, are there any questions that have come in that we can pause to answer right now?
Yep, we did have a question come in. Before I ask that question, I'll just remind folks that two things. One, you could send in your questions using the Q&A panel. Click on that question mark icon. For those of you that are using a mobile device, about 15% of our audience today, click on the menu button in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and you'll see the question mark Q&A icon there. Second of all, handouts. Steve gave you a bunch of homework. I've put it all in a handout for you. You'll find a link to the handout in the chat window, so go ahead and take a look at that now. Bruce asks regarding the trademark issue, some agencies appear to have logos that maybe do not seem to meet the standards that Steve just talked about. Upper Room, for example. Steve, would you care to comment on that?
On that one specifically, I don't care to comment because I don't recall, but some of the agencies of the United Methodist Church have received permission, written permission, a license agreement to use slightly different uses of that. And we can grant that if GCFA wishes to do so. I don't recall whether the Upper Room has or not. I will check and be ready to answer that question in August.
I have observed that driving around here in this neighborhood of Nashville, where several of our agencies are housed, that we've all come into compliance, so far as I know, with the logo and the branding basics as it's shown in the upper left-hand corner of your screen right now for finance and administration. Higher education and ministry looks like that. Discipleship ministries looks like that. And the United Methodist Communications, a few blocks away, used to have a different logo, but I noticed last month, I'm not sure exactly when the change took place, but they have also brought their signage into line with what you see here on your screen. I'll be curious to see what you come up with on that one, Steve. I'm sure we all will be. Well, now we're going to pause and hand it over to Becky. There's the Q&A thing. And Becky, please take it over.
Okay, thank you so much. This is a topic that many of us really would prefer to not ever have to spend much time sitting with, much less responding to. And yet the reality is this challenge sits before every one of us and calls us to do this most important work. I am involved in this presentation for one reason, I believe, and that reason is because the sacred trust has been betrayed in a ministerial relationship. And so as we get started today, I'd like to offer this statement to you and encourage you to ponder it, not only during our time today, but as we come together at the end of August. You have a sacred trust in your role as minister, in your role as DS. And I'm curious about what you believe that statement means to you. And so again, I simply offer that to you as a vessel to hold our conversation around responding to sexual misconduct within the ministerial relationship. As a result of the fiduciary responsibility that you have, because you do have a position of power, you're asked to always act in the best interest of those whom you serve. Again, that seems like that would be a very simple challenge set before us, and yet the reality of how to set healthy boundaries and how to respond when the person that is being accused of sexual misconduct is someone that you were in seminary with. The reality is that when a clergy colleague violates the sacred trust of ordination, the ministry of every Christian is undermined. And that even becomes more of a complicated piece when we talk about the role of the DS and the reality that for you have moved from a position of being in a ministerial relationship directly with parishioners of a church you serve to now being also in a ministerial relationship with the colleagues that you supervise. So it does take it to a new level, and as Myron so graciously pointed out to me earlier, your position really is an extension of the Episcopal office, and so this statement of working from a place of holding a sacred trust is elevated to a very high degree. I would encourage you over the next month to simply allow this statement that you hold a sacred trust to be one of the lens that you look through your work. Bring to us in August specific examples perhaps of where this was more challenging for you in your role as a DS. I think that could be a very good conversation for us to have. For many of us, we've never really spent a lot of time exploring what the definition of excuse me, I'm sorry, I just lost something here.
Becky, let me jump in and I'll
Okay.
take care of that
Jason,
for you.
Something popped up on my screen.
While I bring that back up on the screen, go ahead with
Okay.
what you were commenting on.
Great. Oh, wow. Okay.
Here we go.
Okay. All right. So I think it's important that we are all understanding exactly what our Book of Discipline and Book of Resolutions describe and define as sexual misconduct. This slide is available in your packet that very carefully specifies every behavior, and it reflects the social principles that are also set forth in the discipline under Social Principle 161H and I. So sexual misconduct is a betrayal of sacred trust, and it is a continuum of sexual or gender-directed behaviors, and that includes sexual harassment, which we will spend a lot of time talking about as well in August at our training. I want you to be familiar with this definition because it's very easy for us to want to dismiss behaviors that we may or may not recognize as sexual misconduct behaviors. Sexual misconduct is listed as one of the chargeable offenses in the discipline, and the definition of that of sexual misconduct is located in your Book of Resolutions. When the sacred trust is violated and sexual misconduct within the ministerial relationship has occurred, I offer to you this overview of the complaint process. Again, in our office here, we receive calls, whether that call is from a bishop or whether that call is from a victim. Those calls come because there is some confusion around what might need to happen next. And one of my goals in this office is that we can all work together to remove any element of a guessing game when it comes to responding to sexual misconduct within the church setting. So this slide offers you an overview of that process. Again, in August, we will talk about this in detail. The process is defined in the Book of Discipline in paragraph 363. This complaint process is established solely for the list of chargeable offenses for clergy, and I want to add to that also laity in the discipline. These charges can be brought against laity as well. The supervisory process begins with the receipt of a formal complaint, and that receipt is the receipt by the bishop. So it means the bishop has received the written, signed, formal complaint, and then the process begins. The complaint is to be resolved, referred, or dismissed within 90 days. There is a possibility of a 130-day extension, and the only exception is abeyance, and that is if there is a civil case pending as well. I encourage you to read over this in your Book of Discipline. Be as familiar as you can be with that so that we can be prepared in August to discuss this in detail again, with the goal being that we all walk away with fewer opportunities to guess what might possibly be happening at this point in the process. If everyone has that clear understanding from the beginning, the confusion is just vastly decreased, and all people involved have information that they can work with. That silence of not being given information can be continuing trauma for everyone involved. I stated earlier that your role is an extension of the office of the bishop. And certainly in the case of responding to sexual misconduct, DSs are often the first point of contact for many. Again, the Book of Discipline very clearly spells out what our response will be, and I have identified that response in 3 different roles for the bishop and or DS. One is that you respond from an administrative standpoint, where the promotion of a fair process for all parties happens and procedures are followed. And I want to stop right here and pause and say, please hear me when I say all parties, because that is truly what the goal is that all people through the church law will be offered restorative justice in this. There will be the role of supervision, where ethical standards are upheld and accountability is put into force. All people are held accountable for what has been presented, and that there will be measures taken that very clearly address the importance of accountability for actions. And then finally, but certainly not any less important than the 2 before, is the pastoral response, where again, the United Methodist Church very clearly says we will promote healing. Not only for the victim, we will do that for congregations and family members of all who are involved. That is a huge piece that we cannot forget. We have to remember that we in our roles are called to respond to this problem from a position that holds people accountable and offers healing for everyone involved. This is trauma, and we are so clear when trauma occurs in the form of natural disasters in our world. We know we have to move in quickly. We have to have people ready to respond, because the initial impact of the trauma can be very devastating, and the subsequent ripples of that, especially if it's not dealt with, can continue to promote more traumatic events. Perhaps some of you have served in churches where sexual misconduct has occurred in previous years, and depending on how it was responded to, probably oftentimes has a lot to do with the healthiness of the congregation of that church. So I want to offer a complaint. I'm sorry.
Becky, this is Myron. Before you proceed, I wanted to pause and note that one of our participants noticed that paragraph 361 in the 2012 Book of Discipline it comes under conference relations, and it's about withdrawal of membership to unite with another denomination. I believe
on that first slide, the Sacred Trust slide.
Right.
I apologize for that. I believe it's 362. And 363 also.
Right. The
talks
administrative
about
process.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Just want to clear that up.
And I'll make sure that is changed. Thank you. Because I know 363 also talks about the sacred trust and when it is broken.
Very good. Okay. Proceed. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention.
Sure.
I want to offer a complaint example to you, and you will have the opportunity to submit your answer, and we will share that the result of those answers in this webinar, and again give us a little taste of some of what we will be talking about and how our session will unfold at Lake Junaluska. So a parishioner calls the district superintendent to report her suspicion that Reverend J is using internet pornography on his office computer. Is this a complaint?
And folks, I'm going to open up the polling tool, which you should see on your screen now. So choose the answer that you feel most strongly about. Is this a complaint? Yes, no, or maybe? Choose your answer and click on the Submit button. Becky, those responses are coming in now, and I'll have the results up on the screen for you in about 15 seconds or so. All right, folks, I'm going to close the poll. Don't forget to click on that Submit button. That'll give me the green light and let me know that you've completed the poll. All right, WebEx is going to tally the results, and I'll display the results on your screen now. So, Becky, it looks like 42% of our audience selected no as the answer, and 15% said yes, and 12% said maybe.
Great, great. Okay, so the correct answer to that is no, and it is not a complaint because it is not a written and signed statement. I oftentimes have DSs that call wanting to talk about telephone calls such as that they have received, or even face-to-face visits that they have received and what to do. Again, we will go into much greater detail around these types of scenarios at Lake Junaluska at our face-to-face meeting. I think the thing that I want to pause and say here is that anytime someone calls and reports this suspicion, I would encourage you to definitely consider this a very serious matter and to not simply dismiss it because it is not a signed written complaint. So after speaking with the DS, the parishioner agrees to put her complaint in writing, and the DS receives the signed letter later that week. And the question regarding that scenario is, should this allegation be handled as a complaint? We won't take the time to answer that. The answer to that is yes. Pornography used on church-owned equipment is a form of sexual misconduct. Again, you can see that definition in your Book of Resolutions. Sexual misconduct is a chargeable offense, as noted in the Book of Discipline. This is a good example of how complicated these situations become. The one thing you can always remember, and that you will never, unfortunately, be surprised, is that when there is a complaint of sexual misconduct, it will not be simple. It tends to become very complex. And this example has so many what ifs, what ifs, what ifs in my mind, especially where we are at this age in our society with the use of technology and iPhones and social media and all that is out there that offers us the opportunity to be engaged in relationships. So again, we will go into much greater detail about this at Lake Junaluska, but I just wanted to simply give you a sampling of how we will talk about specific complaints. With this particular example, upon receipt of the signed letter, the DS is encouraged to forward that immediately to the bishop. The bishop then immediately notifies the Board of Ordained Ministry chair that a complaint has been filed. The respondent must be notified. And again, I know I keep saying this, but we will talk about this in so much detail. This is the point, and you know it. Many of you know it because you've already been in it, where rumors begin circulating in the parish. Everyone is making their own judgment on what is happening, and this is such a crucial time for the DS to be visible and present in helping clarify exactly what has happened. We will talk some about response teams. I offer up this question to you for you to spend some time with that, again, is sort of left up to the annual conference that you work in. And the question is really simple. What is a response team and when is it used? I never am surprised by some of the answers that I hear from various ministry settings when I ask that question, what is a response team? So I encourage you to do a little investigation on that. Can you quickly and easily answer the question, does your annual conference have a response team? How is it used? What are the situations that your annual conference response team can be called into? If you do not have a response team, is that something that you as a DS feel strongly that needs to be offered in response to sexual misconduct? Also, I would encourage you over the next month to simply pay attention to and be aware of the times that you are in conversation with ministers who are serving, either in an interim position where a minister has been suspended or is on leave as a result of sexual misconduct or ethical misconduct. Pay attention, be aware. How is ministry going in that particular local church in terms of if this has been responded to face-to-face with the congregation and staff, or if it has not. If it's not, you and I both know that the trauma will continue to be present and reveal itself in probably unhealthy ways in the life of that church. So I think that is all I have for today. Again, I look so forward to the opportunity to get to meet you. I reiterate what Steve offered to you earlier. I definitely want to be a resource for you at Lake Junaluska. So please bring your specific questions, your specific concerns, and let's make sure they get answered before you return to your position.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Thank you very much. And again, I'm sure I speak for all of us in expressing my appreciation for your leadership in this session, and we look forward to working with you when we get to Lake J. Are there any questions that have come in the meantime, Jason, that we can talk about now? We have a few minutes remaining.
Myron, I do not see any questions in the queue at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I would strongly encourage folks to start collecting scenarios, questions, issues you want discussed, and send those forward as you've been instructed. And also, I know, having served as a district superintendent myself, and that's something I didn't say at the outset, I served for 7 years as the district superintendent of the San Diego district, now the South District of the California Pacific Annual Conference. And one of the resources that I developed in the first months was what I called sort of my red book. It was a collection of materials for situations very like the ones that both Steve and Becky have reviewed with us today, because it's very important that when they come up in your ministry that you get it right, that you handle it correctly. But it's also the sort of thing, as Becky said, that you hope doesn't come up often and usually doesn't come up often. And therefore, you're not inclined to commit it to memory, just how to handle each step. So you can reach for it if you have it compiled in one handy place and know that you can have the resources there to walk you through it. And I'm sure they'll help you when we're together next month in developing the resources for these and other similar scenarios. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our time, and we want to review these preparation points for next month. Continue reading Watching Over One Another in Love if you haven't read that already. Review a district superintendent's first year 2CD resource, and also take some of the things we've talked about today and pick those up in conversation with your colleagues in ministry and the superintendency or other directors of Connectional Ministry that you know throughout the connection, and get their input on how they have dealt with these sorts of things. And as we've said several times already, send your questions, topics, and scenarios for us to use in preparation for our time next month. That's all for today, and I want to thank you on behalf of the Council of Bishops. I see Bishop Sandra Steiner-Ball was one of our participants today. Welcome to you, Bishop, and also the Board of Higher Education and Ministry and Discipleship Ministries. We look forward to working together with you next month, and watch for continued communications from our offices in preparation for that time together. Thank you, and until we see you then, grace and peace to all of you.